In a freezing blizzard, a broken woman clutching her newborn is left to die by the very family she trusted. But what they didn't know was that within hours,
I told
she
you this would
rise with
happen.
unimaginable
He
power
chose me.
and return to destroy everything they built.
Let her go, darling. She
This
needs
is
her
the story
rest.
of betrayal, humiliation,
We have you.
and a revenge so precise
You and the baby
it
are
became
safe.
legendary. Where
Let's
lies
get you
crumble,
inside.
truth explodes, and karma strikes harder than anyone
Let go of
expects.
him, please.
It reminds us that no matter how powerless
This is
you feel,
unacceptable
the moment
behavior.
can come when
The
they least
child
expect
belongs
it.
with us.
And when it does,
As of this
everything
morning,
changes.
all
If
previous
you believe in
arrangements are
justice and
void.
second chances,
I'm taking
don't
over,
forget to like
effective
and share this video
immediately.
to support the channel and keep these powerful stories coming. Thanks for watching.
Picture this. You're lying in a snowbank, and the white ground is slowly turning red from your own blood. The tiny baby in your arms, just 3 days old, has finally gone silent. Your husband's family is responsible for this. They just threw you down a set of cold stone stairs during a blinding blizzard. They called you trash, a nobody, something to be discarded. What they did not know was that in just 4 hours, an inheritance of $2.3 billion would fall into my lap, and I was going to make them regret every single thing they did. My name is Emma Harrington, and this is not a work of fiction. This is the real story of how I went from dying in the snow to dismantling an entire family empire. It is a story about a powerful family that thought they were untouchable, and how they learned the most painful lesson of all. Never, ever underestimate the woman you decide to throw away. For 3 years, they made it their mission to humiliate me. They recorded my most private, painful moments and shared them with their 500,000 followers. They even manipulated the court system to try and steal my newborn baby. They truly thought their money and their influence made them invincible. They were so wrong, because when I entered that boardroom just 8 weeks later, with brand new platinum blonde hair, a billion-dollar company supporting me, and 4 million people watching a live stream, well, the expression on their faces when they finally understood who I was, that moment made everything I went through worth it. But this next part is what made the whole thing legendary. They had signed a consent document without even reading it, the same exact trap they had sprung on me so many times before. Karma really does have a sense of humor. You need to stay with me until the conclusion, because the surprise twist in the courtroom, the arrival of the FBI, and what happened to each of them one by one. You will not be able to believe how this story finishes. If you have ever been told you are not good enough, if you have ever been cast aside, then this story is dedicated to you. Before we begin, could you do something for me? Please press that like button right now if you believe in injustice. Then leave a comment letting me know what you might have done in my place. And please, subscribe to the channel, because the story I plan on sharing next week is even more unbelievable than this one. You really do not want to miss out. Now, allow me to take you back to where it all started. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day, the day my entire life completely shattered. They dragged me by my hair across cold marble floors, while my daughter, only 3 days old, was screaming in my arms. Then they tossed us down a flight of stone steps, right into a raging blizzard. They had no idea that in 4 hours, I was set to inherit $2.3 billion, and I was preparing to make every last one of them sorry for what they had done. I am Emma, and this is the tale of how I went from bleeding out in a snowstorm to bringing a whole family dynasty to its knees. You really should stick around for the ending, because the moment they realized who I was in that boardroom was caught on video. It went viral and absolutely destroyed their reputation. You do not want to miss the part where 4 million people watched them get on their knees and beg. Let me bring you back to the beginning of this whole nightmare. 3 days before that, I was lying in a hospital bed at Mercy General. My body was still struggling to recover from an emergency C-section. The pain was almost unbearable. It radiated from the long incision on my stomach every time I took a breath, but even that physical agony was nothing compared to the deep, hollow feeling in my soul. My husband, Michael, had not come to see me in 52 hours, not for a single minute. I know because I had been counting. The nurses kept looking at me with such pity in their eyes. I could hear them whispering to one another when they thought I was asleep. I kept telling myself that he was just swamped with work, that he would show up any minute. I cannot believe how foolish I was. It was Valentine's Day, February 14th. The cruel irony of the date was not lost on me. My new daughter, Grace, was sleeping peacefully in the small bassinet next to my bed. Her little face had a slight yellow tint from jaundice. The doctor assured me it was very normal and I should not worry. But every time I looked down at her, a knot of fear tightened in my chest. She was so incredibly small, so fragile, and so absolutely perfect. And her own father had not even bothered to come and say hello. I still had intravenous lines in both of my arms, and a catheter was still in place. The pain from the surgery was a constant 7 out of 10, and that was with the powerful medication they gave me every 4 hours. Each tiny shift of my body was pure agony. At around 11 p.m., my best friend Rebecca slipped quietly into my room. She was a nurse in the intensive care unit on a different floor. She had been using her breaks to come and check on me. "Emma, sweetie," Rebecca said. Her voice sounded tight, filled with an emotion I could not identify. She looked genuinely alarmed, not just sympathetic. "I have to show you something. I need you to promise not to freak out, but you have to see this before you hear it from someone else." She passed me her phone. The Instagram app was already open on the screen. I looked down at it, and right there in that hospital bed, my entire universe just fell to pieces. It was Michael's profile. He had posted a picture of himself with another woman. She was stunning. She was radiant and very clearly pregnant. Her hand was placed on her round belly in that protective way that expectant mothers have. They were at Le Bernardin, a 5-star restaurant that I could only dream of, a place Michael had certainly never taken me. The caption underneath the picture read, "With my true family, being honest at last. New beginnings are blessed with truth." He had posted it 6 hours earlier, and it already had 47,000 likes. The comments section was a mix of congratulations and utter confusion. "Wait, I thought you were married," one person wrote. "Who is this other woman?" another one asked. But the majority of the comments were just heart emojis and people praising him for his honesty. I felt like a giant hand had reached into my chest and was squeezing my heart until it stopped. "Emma," Rebecca said softly, "there is more. He has been telling people around the hospital that you tricked him into marriage. He is saying he is finally free to be with the woman he really loves. 3 years? We had been married for 3 years. 3 years of me trying my absolute best to be good enough for him, for his high society family, for their world. 3 years of giving him all my love and loyalty, and this whole time, he had someone else on the side." My phone started buzzing on the nightstand. It was a call from a number I did not recognize. I was too devastated to even think about answering. I was completely shattered. I just let it ring until it went to voicemail. I did not even really register that the caller ID had briefly flashed the name W. Harrington, private. I would not find out until much later that my own grandfather had tried to call me at 11:47 p.m. to arrange our first ever meeting. I would never know how incredibly close I came to being saved from what was about to happen. Dr. Morrison walked into my room carrying a clipboard with my discharge papers. She was the obstetrician who had delivered Grace, a kind woman in her 50s, who had gentle hands and worried eyes. "Mrs. Sterling," she began cautiously, "I need to discuss something with you. The hospital's social services department has flagged a few things that are concerning. Your husband has not visited you, and there has been some—" The door to my room was suddenly thrown open with a loud bang. Victoria Sterling, my mother-in-law, marched in first. She was wearing a designer coat, that was probably worth more than my car, and a Hermes bag was draped over her arm. Her eyes were blazing with a cold fury. Following right behind her was Jonathan, Michael's father, dressed in an expensive suit that practically shouted old money and influence. Then came Madison, Michael's sister, who already had her phone out and was recording everything. And bringing up the rear was Alexis, the woman from the Instagram post. She wore a smug, satisfied smile on her face. One of her hands was resting on her pregnant stomach, as if she were marking her territory. Dr. Morrison tried to step between them and me. I am sorry, but visiting hours have ended, and Mrs. Sterling needs her. Victoria silenced her with a dismissive wave of her hand. We are her family. We have every right to be in here. She then shoved a folder into Dr. Morrison's hands. These are documents from Child Protective Services. My daughter-in-law is mentally unstable and an unfit mother. We are here to ensure the safety of our granddaughter. I just stared at them, completely unable to process what was going on. Child Protective Services documents. What? The folder was filled with forged papers that falsely claimed I was suffering from postpartum psychosis. It included a fake psychiatric report from a Dr. Gerald Rothman, who was the Sterling family's personal on-call psychiatrist. The report recommended that my baby be taken from my custody immediately until I could undergo a full evaluation. I saw Dr. Morrison's hands trembling as she scanned the documents. I could tell she was struggling. She knew something was very wrong here, but she was not sure how to fight it. The Sterling family had donated the entire East Wing to this hospital, which gave them an enormous amount of influence. Victoria walked right up to my bed, and her voice was like dripping acid. You have been a stain on my son's life for far too long. This pathetic little drama of yours is over tonight. I felt weak, and the pain medication made my head feel like it was full of cotton. What are you talking about? I just gave birth to his child. Alexis let out a short, cruel laugh. She actually laughed at me. She stepped closer and pulled a set of papers from her designer purse. That baby isn't his. We already had a DNA test done. She held out fake lab results for me to see. The paper clearly stated that the probability of paternity was 0%. My head was spinning. When could they have done this? How? I had not left the hospital. This was impossible. You cannot just test a newborn's DNA without the mother's consent. But they had these papers, and they looked completely real. Madison then started a live stream on her Instagram account. I could see the reflection of myself on her phone's screen. I looked so pale and broken in that hospital gown. Hey everyone, Madison said, her voice cheerful and mean. For everyone who wanted to know the truth about my brother's gold-digging wife, well, here it is, coming to you live from the hospital, where she is trying to trap him with a baby that doesn't even belong to him. I watched in absolute horror as a flood of comments filled up the screen. Oh my gosh, is this really happening? She looks so pathetic. Your brother deserves so much better. 500,000 of her followers were watching me during the worst moment of my entire life. Victoria leaned down close to my face. Let me tell you who you are, Emma. You are a joke. You were just a bet that my son made with his friends back in college. It was a bet for $100,000 to see if he could marry the poorest girl at the university and stay with her for 3 years. She held up her phone to show me a video. I saw Michael 4 years ago at his bachelor party, completely drunk and laughing with 7 of his buddies. Guys, 3 years with some girl from the wrong side of the tracks for $100,000? That is the easiest money I will ever make. I will just close my eyes and picture someone else when we... Laughter erupted. So much of it. In that moment, my entire world shattered. 3 years. Every time he had said, I love you. Every anniversary we celebrated. Every single moment I worked so hard to belong in his world. To be good enough for the Sterling name. It was all a complete lie. Madison's eyes fell on the bracelet I was wearing. It was just a simple silver chain with a tiny charm. A piece that had belonged to my mother. It was the only thing I had left of her. "Oh, what is this little thing?" Madison said with a sneer. "Is this your precious family treasure?" She reached out to rip it off my arm. As I pulled away, a terrible pain shot through my stomach. "Do not touch it. It is all I have from my mom." That is when Victoria slapped me, hard across my face. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent hospital room. Dr. Morrison let out a gasp. "That is assault. I am calling security." Jonathan's voice was as cold as a winter morning. "We are the security. This is Harrington Memorial Hospital. My family funded the entire East Wing. You can call anyone you like. But none of them knew the truth. Not a single one of them realized this hospital was named for my own grandfather. They were making threats against me inside a building that was part of my family's legacy." Just then, a woman named Rebecca ran into the room. "What in the world is happening here?" The hospital security guards, who followed her, looked confused. Jonathan's donations made him a very powerful man, and they did not know what they should do. Victoria shoved a stack of divorce papers right into my face. "You will sign these right now, or I will have Child Protective Services take your baby away tomorrow. We have doctors who will testify that you are an unstable mother. You will never see your daughter again," she hissed. The pain medication made me feel weak, and I was filled with terror. A sharp agony ripped through my surgical wound, and the whole room started to spin around me. "Please," I cried, begging them. "Please, just do not take my baby from me." My hand was shaking so badly that I could barely hold the pen, but I signed the papers. Alexis leaned in very close, and I could feel her hot breath on my ear as she whispered, "Did you really think someone like you could ever keep a sterling baby? You are a nobody. You will always be a nobody." Victoria smiled, a cold, triumphant look on her face. "You have been discharged. Come to the mansion tomorrow to collect your junk. After that, you will disappear for good." Then they left. I fell apart completely, sobbing so hard that my entire body trembled. Rebecca wrapped her arms around me. "We have to call the police. This is illegal. They forced you to do this." "No," I whispered. "They have powerful lawyers and endless money. I have nothing at all. I just need to keep my baby safe." I did not notice Dr. Morrison take out her own personal phone. I had no idea that she had been recording the entire thing. I did not know that as a doctor, she was required by law to report abuse, and took that duty very seriously. "I have documented everything," she said in a low voice. "This is not right. I was so broken, I did not even care." "It will not make a difference," I told her. "People like them always win." But it would make a difference. It would make a huge difference later on. I just did not know it at the time. The next morning, on February 15th, I had to call an Uber to take me to the Sterling family home in Greenwich, Connecticut. I could not even buy my own car because Michael had controlled every single dollar during our entire marriage. My daughter, Grace, was in a car seat the hospital had given to us, covered with only a thin blanket. She looked so small and so vulnerable. She was just 3 days old, and her life was already falling to pieces. The mansion appeared in front of us. It was a giant Georgian-style house that screamed of old money from every brick and window. I had lived inside that house for 3 years, but not once did it ever feel like it was my home. My key still worked in the lock. When I walked through the huge front doors, the house staff, people I once believed were my friends, would not even look at me. A couple of them actually smiled with contempt. I found that all of my possessions had been packed into black garbage bags and tossed onto the driveway like trash. My hand shook as I walked to my room. It was not the main bedroom, of course. Michael and I never once shared a bed. I was always forced to sleep in the servants' area in the back of the house because they never truly saw me as part of the family. Everything I owned had been destroyed. My clothes were soaked with water from the garden fountain, completely ruined. My books had been ripped apart. The pages were scattered all over the floor. The photographs I had of my mother had been burned in the living room fireplace. I could still smell the smoke. All of my mother's jewelry was missing. I found Madison in the main bedroom, and she was wearing it. She had my mother's pearl necklace on, the one thing I treasured more than anything else in the world. "Oh, this old piece?" Madison said with a laugh as she took a picture of herself. "It just looks so much better on me, don't you think?" Finders keepers. As I walked through that awful mansion for the last time, terrible memories came flooding back. At the first Thanksgiving, Victoria made me serve all the guests while the rest of the family sat and ate. When I tried to sit down at the table, she said, "The hired help does not sit with the family, dear." Michael did not say a single word to defend me. At a charity event in my second year there, I had to wear a dress someone loaned me because I had no money to purchase one. Victoria told me not to embarrass the family and to just stand in the back. "Do not speak to any of the important guests," she warned me. Jonathan made me work checking coats, while Madison walked around in designer dresses. Then on my third Christmas, the Sterlings opened presents that were worth thousands of dollars. Michael's gift to me was a new vacuum cleaner. The whole family laughed. Victoria said, "Well, at least now you can finally be useful." It had been 3 long years of cruel and calculated humiliation. I collected the few items that they had not destroyed and put them in a single small bag. Grace began to cry. She needed her diaper changed, and she was hungry, but there was nowhere in that house for me to care for her. Before I could leave, Victoria's voice came over the house intercom. "Emma, dear, please come to the main hall. Immediately. We are all waiting for you." A cold knot of fear formed in my stomach. The main hall was a massive room with marble floors that I had been forced to clean on my hands and knees. A crystal chandelier, worth more than most people make in a year, hung from the high ceiling. The entire Sterling family was there, arranged like a royal family holding court. Victoria was in the center, a queen in her kingdom, with Jonathan standing beside her. He was the king. Madison was standing on the staircase with her phone, already recording a video. Michael was leaning on a wall, and he could not even bring himself to look at me. And Alexis was holding onto Michael's arm, wearing that same look of victory. 4 security guards I did not recognize stood near the door. They were very large men, clearly hired for intimidation. Victoria's voice was like ice. "Before you leave, and we erase you from our memories forever, you will get on your knees and you will apologize. You will apologize for wasting 3 years of our time and for trying to trap my son with a child that is not his." I held Grace even tighter to my chest. "No, I am leaving now. Let me pass." Jonathan's threat was spoken softly, but it was full of menace. "You will kneel," he said, "or we will make certain that every homeless shelter in Connecticut hears that you are an unstable person who abuses her child. Child Protective Services will come after you for the rest of your days." "I will not kneel." Victoria just gave a small nod to the security guards. Everything after that happened so fast. One guard grabbed both of my arms. I screamed, "Please, I am holding my baby. Please do not hurt my baby." Another guard then ripped Grace right out of my arms. The pain was immediate, and it was blinding. My C-section stitches tore open because of the struggle. I felt something warm and wet spreading across my clothes. It was blood. Grace was screaming, that high, terrified cry of a newborn. A cry that means pure fear and pain. Madison was live streaming the entire horrible scene. "This is what happens when someone who is only after money tries to take on the wrong family," she said into her phone. "You are watching justice happen live." The comments started flooding in. She got what she deserved. Throw the trash out. That baby is not even his. 500,000 people were watching as my life was completely destroyed in front of them. The guards dragged me across the freezing marble floor. I was too weak to even try to fight them. I was still recovering from major surgery, and the blood I was losing was making me feel faint. My shoulder slammed into the corner of a marble pillar with a terrible cracking sound. A sharp pain shot all the way down my arm. I thought it was dislocated. My bracelet got caught on the sharp edge of the marble. The little charm broke off and slid across the floor. A maid quickly bent down, picked it up, and slipped it into her pocket. I did not realize it then, but that small act would become very important later. I was bleeding and screaming and begging them to stop. Alexis just stood there and laughed. This is so sad to watch. Michael, is this really what you wasted 3 years of your life on? Michael's voice was hollow and empty of any emotion. Just get her out of the house. He did not even have the courage to look guilty. They dragged me to the huge oak doors at the front of the mansion and threw them open. Outside, a blizzard was howling. It was 15 degrees Fahrenheit, but the brutal wind made it feel like it was -5. The world vanished behind a thick curtain of falling snow. A savage wind howled, sounding like a creature in pain. They shoved me out into the storm, and I tumbled down the hard stone steps. I tried to pull my body into a tight ball, but each of the 5 steps was a fresh burst of agony. My already hurt shoulder took the worst of the fall. I finally landed in a soft pile of snow, and my blood instantly stained the pure white, a shocking shade of red. My purse followed me, thrown from the doorway above. Its contents flew everywhere, scattering in the snow. My pills, diapers for Grace, her only spare set of clothes. It was everything I owned in the entire world. A moment later, a guard casually tossed my baby Grace down toward me. I managed to catch her just in time. I clutched her tiny body to my chest, trying to use my own warmth to protect her from the freezing air. From the top of the stairs, Madison screamed, "If you ever come back here, we will call the police for trespassing. Have fun with your fake baby." Victoria's voice was the last thing I heard, a blade of ice in the storm. This is exactly where trash belongs. Then the massive front door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gun shot in the silent, empty street. I sat there, stunned in the freezing snow. I was covered in blood. My shoulder was dislocated, and the stitches from my C-section had ripped open. Grace's cries were becoming faint, a sound that was far more terrifying than her loudest screams. My phone was useless, having shattered into pieces during the fall. I had absolutely no money. I did not even have a coat, only the thin hospital cardigan I was wearing. My feet were in paper-thin hospital slippers, and they were already soaked through with icy water. In that horrible moment, I was certain that my daughter and I were going to die on that frozen ground. "I am so sorry, my sweet girl," I whispered, tucking her small body inside my cardigan to share what little body heat I had left. "Your mommy tried so hard. I am just so sorry." And then Grace became perfectly still and silent. That silence sent a new wave of terror through me. A baby should never go quiet in this kind of cold. It means the worst is happening. "Please do not go," I begged her limp little body. "Please, baby, you are all I have in this world." My own vision started to blur as the cold began to win. I could feel my own body starting to give up. I let my eyes close, feeling ready for the end to come. But then I saw bright lights slicing through the blizzard. 3 big black Mercedes sport utility vehicles emerged from the storm, appearing like ghosts in the middle of the night. The vehicles pulled up right in front of where I was sitting. Their doors swung open before they had even fully stopped. An older man wearing a flawless Tom Ford suit stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was holding a large black umbrella over his head. Even at 3:47 in the morning, during a snowstorm, he looked incredibly powerful and composed. "Miss Emma Catherine Morgan," he said, his voice calm and clear. "Thank goodness we were able to find you." I could hardly speak. Who are you?" He knelt right beside me in the snow, completely ruining his expensive $3,000 suit. He did not seem to notice or care. "Your grandfather sent me to find you," he explained. "We must get you and your daughter to a safe place, immediately." An entire team of paramedics in uniforms from Harrington Global Medical was rushing out from the other vehicles. They carried heated blankets and emergency medical bags. "My grandfather?" I asked, confused. "My mother always told me her father died long before I was born. I do not have a—" "I assure you, you do," he said, cutting me off gently. "His name is William James Harrington, and we have to get you to Harrington Medical Center right now." Your daughter is only 10 minutes away from severe, irreversible hypothermia. The paramedics moved with practiced and amazing speed. They carefully wrapped both Grace and me in special heated blankets. One of them inserted an intravenous line into my arm as I was badly dehydrated. Another placed a small oxygen mask over Grace's tiny face because her breathing had become weak. Someone gently secured my dislocated shoulder, while another paramedic put pressure on my wounds to stop the bleeding. They carefully lifted us onto a stretcher and into one of the warm sport utility vehicles. The sudden warmth felt like a miracle after being in the brutal cold. The older man, who I would later learn was named Richard Blackwell, sat with us, overseeing every single detail. The drivers expertly navigated the storm-covered roads, driving as if the blizzard was not even there. Richard was speaking quietly but urgently into his phone. "Dr. Anderson, our estimated arrival time is 8 minutes. I have a 28-year-old woman, 3 days after a C-section, and she is bleeding. She also has a probable shoulder dislocation and is suffering from moderate hypothermia. I also have a 3-day-old baby in critical condition with severe hypothermia. Please prepare the neonatal intensive care unit and have a full trauma team ready for us." A paramedic next to me was checking Grace's temperature. It was 94 degrees. The doctor's voice on the phone was serious and low. "We will need to warm her up very slowly. My beautiful newborn daughter's temperature was supposed to be somewhere between 97 and 99 degrees. I knew that if it fell to 93 degrees, her small organs would begin to shut down. I could only watch as they worked to save her. I was too tired and hurt to do anything else. I had to trust these strangers, who had appeared from nowhere, to rescue us. We arrived at the Harrington Private Medical Center at 4:15 in the morning. This place was nothing like the city hospital where I had given birth. It was like stepping into a different universe. This was a private hospital designed for the extremely wealthy. With shiny marble floors and original paintings on the walls, the patient rooms looked like suites at a 5-star hotel. My little Grace was taken straight to the neonatal intensive care unit, where a team of 6 different specialists was already waiting for her. They immediately started a slow warming process for Grace and hooked her up to machines that monitored her every breath and heartbeat. Every move they made was calm and incredibly precise. Dr. Anderson, who was the chief of pediatrics, talked to me as his team cared for my daughter. He said, "You brought her here just in the nick of time. Another 5 minutes in that cold, and she likely would have suffered permanent brain damage." I was taken to my own private suite, which truly felt more like a room at the Four Seasons. A team of doctors set my dislocated shoulder, which was unbelievably painful, but it had to be done. They cleaned my C-section wound and stitched it closed again. They started a blood transfusion through my intravenous line and gave me strong antibiotics, because being exposed to the cold with open wounds meant I had a high chance of getting a serious infection. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they gave me pain medication that actually stopped the hurt. I finally woke up around 11 o'clock that morning, after sleeping for a solid 7 hours. Bright sunlight was pouring into the room through the large windows. For a brief moment, I desperately hoped that the whole thing had been a terrible, horrible nightmare. But then, I saw the bandages on my shoulder, the intravenous tubes in my arm, and the medical machines all around me. A sudden, sharp panic gripped me. Grace. Where was my baby girl? At that very second, Dr. Morrison walked into my room. She was the same doctor who had delivered Grace at the other hospital. "Emma, just breathe," she said in a soothing voice. "Grace is stable. She is in the neonatal unit, and they are watching her every second. She is going to be perfectly fine." My mind was racing. "What are you doing here? How is this possible?" "Mr. Blackwell called me personally," she said. "He told me what happened. I resigned from my position at Mercy General first thing this morning. I refused to work at a hospital that would allow someone to be treated the way you were." A minute later, my best friend, Rebecca, came rushing into the room. She gave me a very gentle hug and immediately burst into tears. "Oh, Emma, I was so worried. You did not answer your phone this morning, so I drove over to the Sterling mansion. I saw all the blood in the snow. I was so scared I thought. Her voice cracked with emotion, and she could not say any more. It is okay, I told her softly. We are both okay now. Then Richard Blackwell entered my room carrying a large leather portfolio. Ladies, he said in a calm, professional tone, I must ask for a moment alone with Emma. The information I'm about to share with her is highly confidential. Rebecca and Dr. Morrison both nodded and left the room, their faces filled with concern. Richard moved a chair close to my bedside. Just then, a nurse wheeled a rolling intensive care bassinet into my room. Inside was Grace. She was still connected to monitors, but she was safe and stable. The sight of my daughter, alive and peacefully sleeping, made me start to cry all over again, but this time they were tears of relief. Emma, Richard said gently, your mother's full name was Catherine Harrington before she married and became Catherine Morgan. Your grandfather is William James Harrington, the founder and chief executive officer of Harrington Global Industries. He opened his portfolio and showed me a photograph of an older man. He had very kind eyes, but he also had an expression of immense power. I had never once seen this man's face in my entire life. I do not know him, I said quietly. My mother never spoke about her family. She always told me that they had all passed away. Richard then began to tell me the story I never knew. My mother had run away from her home at the age of 19 after a terrible argument with her father. The argument had been about my father, James Morgan. William was convinced that James was only interested in his daughter because of her family's wealth. And he had been right. But my mother, Catherine, was incredibly stubborn and proud. She left home with absolutely nothing, legally changed her last name, and moved all the way to Ohio. She worked 3 different jobs just to support us after my father abandoned us when I was only 2 years old. Her pride was so strong that she never once called her family for help. And her father's pride was so strong that he never called to apologize. They were 2 headstrong people who clearly loved each other very much, but they could not find a way to move past their own mistakes. When my mother was killed in a car accident 5 years ago, William was completely devastated. He had been secretly keeping an eye on her for decades, always watching over her from a distance. But he never made contact. After her death, he began searching for you, Richard went on. He finally located you 2 years ago, shortly after you married Michael Sterling. The air left my lungs. For 2 entire years, William had been watching over me from afar. He had hired security teams to follow me discreetly and had installed surveillance cameras to monitor the Sterling property. He had seen every single cruel act they committed against me. Richard then opened a laptop and showed me several video clips. I saw Victoria ordering me around at her parties, as if I were one of the hired servants. I saw Jonathan forcing me to do manual labor around the estate for no pay. I watched Madison's daily taunts and Michael's cold, dismissive behavior. It had all been recorded. Why did he not do something sooner? I asked, my voice breaking. Richard explained that William had wanted to intervene desperately, but his legal team, which included Richard, had strongly advised him to wait for the right moment. They had to construct an ironclad legal shield around the inheritance. It was crucial to stop the Sterlings from ever claiming, I only married Michael because I was after his money. They needed to prevent anyone from challenging the will. A special trust was created to protect me from everybody. The original plan was for William to finally introduce himself on February 15th, the day after I had my baby. That day was today. That unknown number that called me last night, I whispered. Richard nodded. That call was from William. He was on a flight back from London. He wanted to let you know he would be at the hospital this morning to finally see you. For the first time, a tremor of real emotion entered Richard's voice. His plane landed at 6 in the morning. He went directly to his car. I called him to arrange your meeting time, and he asked how you were. I had to tell him you had been discharged and that we had no idea where you had gone. He added, the Global Positioning System tracker showed your location at the Sterling Mansion. I was confused. What tracker? I asked. The bracelet, he said. Your mother's bracelet. the one you have worn without fail for years. William had a medical quality tracking chip placed inside the charm. It is completely waterproof, has a 5-year battery, and includes heat sensors. I automatically reached for my wrist. The bracelet was not there. It must have broken and been lost somewhere in the snow. That is how we managed to find you at 3 in the morning, Richard explained. The heat sensor sent an emergency alert that your body temperature was dropping to a dangerous level. I called William right away and told him you were in grave danger. He immediately brought up the live security cameras we had installed at the Sterling property. Richard then showed me the video on his tablet. I watched the horrible attack happen all over again. I saw Madison filming with her phone as they dragged me outside and pushed me down the steps. I saw the blood on the snow and my daughter, Grace, looking so still. Everything was marked with the time, from 2:47 to 3 in the morning. William saw that video. At 7:05 in the morning, in his car, Richard's voice completely broke. At 7:09 in the morning, his driver called me. William had collapsed after a massive heart attack. The paramedics arrived at 7:21. He was officially pronounced dead at 7:32 in the morning. The awful truth hit me with physical force. Emma, when they threw you down those steps at 3 in the morning, you were a nobody. You were precisely what they always called you, poor, powerless, and disposable. But at 7:32 in the morning, just 4 hours later, when William's death was officially recorded, you became the one and only heir to a $2.3 billion empire. Knowing they tossed you out in the snow when you had absolutely nothing. But the second you hit that ground, the clock was already counting down to 7:32 in the morning. You were already a billionaire. They just were not aware of it yet. I could only stare at him, my brain unable to process everything. Your grandfather died watching them hurt you, Richard said in a soft voice. He died knowing that he was about to give you all the power you needed to destroy them. He passed me an envelope. It was William's handwriting on thick, heavy paper. I read the letter as tears streamed down my face. My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, it means that I am gone. I am so deeply sorry that I waited too long. I was flying home to finally meet you in person. I wanted to apologize for failing your mother, for not being able to find you sooner, and for standing by while that family caused you so much pain. I wanted all the legal protections set up first. I had to be sure that nobody could ever steal what I am giving to you. But I should have focused on protecting you instead. I saw the security footage this morning. Watching them throw you and Grace out into the snow, I realized I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. My heart simply could not handle it. But even in death, I can still keep you safe. Everything I have built in my life is now yours. $2.3 billion. 40 companies, real estate in 18 countries, every last bit of it. Take this empire that is now yours. Show them what being a Harrington truly means. Never again let anyone make you bow your head. Make them pay for every single bruise, every tear, and every moment they made you feel like you were worthless. You are not garbage. You are my granddaughter. You are more powerful than you can imagine, and I am so sorry I will not be here to witness you rise. With all my love, Grandfather William. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed. Beside me, Grace was sleeping safely in her bassinet. We were finally out of harm's way. The trust was already active. Richard spoke. Everything is transferred to you immediately. There is no court process, and there are no delays. The estate taxes have been arranged, and the board of directors has been notified. Emma, as of 8 in the morning today, you are the chairwoman of Harrington Global Industries. And the Sterling family has no idea. I looked up at him, my face still wet with tears, but a new light was in my eyes. It was something cold and hard. Tell me everything about their businesses, I said. Every vulnerability, every single weakness. Richard smiled for the very first time. Now, he said, you sound just like your grandfather. On the very next day, February 16th, I was sitting in a wheelchair in a private conference room at Harrington Global. I was still recovering, but I needed to understand the power that I now held. Grace was beside me in a designer stroller, being cared for by one of the Harrington medical team. She was healthy now. The yellow tint in her skin was fading, and her color was returning to normal. Richard gave me thick, leather-bound folders on the Sterling family. Sterling Industries is drowning in catastrophic debt, he started. $83 million in total. He showed me the financial statements. Jonathan had stolen $12 million from the company's retirement fund to pay for his personal lifestyle. Bad business deals had cost them an additional $31 million, and their business loans were up to $40 million. They were just 3 months from complete bankruptcy, unless they could find a new source of money. Jonathan applied to Harrington Global for a $75 million contract last month, Richard said. It is a government defense project where we act as the main contractor. It is their only chance to survive, and we are the ones who decide if they get it. You decide. You are the chief executive officer. Next, he handed me the information on Victoria. Sterling-style boutiques, her little side project. She has 5 shops in Connecticut and Manhattan. All of them are located in buildings owned by Harrington, Richard went on. And her rental agreements are up for renewal in 47 days. She is also $480,000 late on her rent payments. But here is the most interesting part. She has been lying about her income to the Internal Revenue Service. We have proof of $2.3 million in tax evasion. I asked, "Can we report her?" He replied. "The anonymous tip has already been written. It is just waiting for you to give the word." Then, a private investigator named James Crawford gave me Madison's file. "Madison Sterling, age 32, he started. "She tells everyone on her public profiles that she is 26. He showed me a copy of her driver's license next to a screenshot from her Instagram page. The birth years were not the same. Madison had a long history of cosmetic surgeries, and none of them had ever been disclosed. She had a nose operation in 2019 and breast implants in 2020. She also had regular cheek fillers, Botox, and lip injections. In 2021, she got a Brazilian butt lift. Her agreement with the prestige agency was extremely clear. No unapproved surgeries. It was a reason to be fired. "Who owns the prestige agency?" I asked. Richard just smiled. "As of yesterday, you do. Harrington Global acquired it 2 weeks ago. Madison has absolutely no idea." The next file was Michael's. The bet he had made in college was saved, wet in writing, in a group chat with 8 people. And not a single one of them had been smart enough to delete the conversation. Brad Miller wrote, "Dude, there is no way you can stay married to that broke girl for 3 years. My own husband, Michael Sterling, replied, $100,000 says I can. This will be the easiest money I ever make." Another friend, Chad Morrison, asked, "What if she finds out?" Michael's response was horrifying. "She will not. She is too stupid and desperate to ever question a thing." There was also a video. It was a longer version of the one Victoria showed me from the bachelor party. In this one, Michael admitted that he closed his eyes and pretended I was Alexis. Everyone thought it was hilarious. The file also revealed that Michael had embezzled $3.8 million from his own family's company, Sterling Industries. He used that money to pay for his fancy lifestyle with Alexis. Crawford, my lawyer, added, "Jonathan knows about the theft, but he covered it all up to protect the family name." Finally, we looked at the file for Alexis Beaumont, but that was not her real name. Crawford showed the mugshot from California, dated 2019. "Her real name is Alexandra Marie Thompson," he said. "She was a professional con artist with 3 other known cases. In the first case, in 2018, she got engaged to a tech millionaire named Richard Pemberton. She faked a pregnancy, stole $400,000, and then disappeared right before she was supposed to have a miscarriage. In the second case, in 2020, she was engaged to a hedge fund manager, David Collins. She faked another pregnancy and vanished with $650,000. Then there was a third case from 2021 when she was engaged to a drug company executive named Marcus Whitmore. She pulled the same fake pregnancy scheme, but was exposed before she could get any money. A warrant was put out for her arrest. She was wanted in California for fraud, for skipping bail, for identity theft, and for wire fraud, Crawford went on. The pregnancy with Michael is also a complete fake. We found the ultrasound image. She purchased it from a dark web forum for $200. I had to ask him, does Michael have any idea about this? Not at this time, he said. I paused to think. If I exposed Alexis right now, Michael would just be seen as a victim, a poor guy fooled by a professional con artist. Richard looked at me, and I saw a touch of pride in his eyes. You are learning very quickly. We will hold on to this information about Alexis for later. We will deploy it when it will do the maximum amount of damage. The following 8 weeks were a period of complete reinvention for me. The first week was all about my physical healing and learning the basics of business. I started physical therapy for my shoulder and for the scar from my C-section. I learned how to cradle my baby, Grace, in one arm while I reviewed quarterly reports with the other. Richard showed me how to break down financial statements. I attended board meetings where I remained silent, simply observing and absorbing every detail about Harrington Global. In the second week, I began to build my new identity as a businesswoman. Harrington's top executives gave me a crash course in business administration. I dove into the weaknesses of Sterling Industries, filling pages with notes and asking pointed questions that seemed to impress everyone. I delivered my first presentation to the board by myself, covering the company's technology division. I did an outstanding job. The third week was focused on changing my physical appearance. I went on a shopping spree for designer clothes, filling my wardrobe with Tom Ford suits, Armani blazers, and Louboutin heels. My soft brown hair was dyed and styled into a sharp, platinum blonde look. I took lessons from a professional makeup artist and received media training to refine my voice and posture. You need to stand like you own the room, my coach instructed me, because you do. In the fourth week, my education was about power. I began taking self-defense classes, specifically Krav Maga. I made a promise to myself that I would never be helpless again. I joined Richard in negotiation workshops and had meetings with the company's legal team. They showed me all the legal ways to completely dismantle someone's life. I practiced my serious boardroom face in the mirror until it looked cold, powerful, and absolutely unbreakable. During the 5th and 6th weeks, we began to make our strategic moves. Harrington Global quietly bought up all of Sterling Industries' debt from 15 different lenders. We used an untraceable shell company to acquire Madison's modeling agency. We also brought in forensic accountants to dig into Victoria's boutiques and gathered all the necessary evidence for the Internal Revenue Service. The 7th week was dedicated to preparing the final trap. I collaborated with the graphics department to create my boardroom presentation. I forced myself to watch the security footage of my own assault again and again. We obtained the video from the Sterling estate because of a maid who discovered my bracelet charm. She came forward after my assistant, Emma, gave her $50,000 for the charm and for the secret video she had recorded with her phone. We started leaking anonymous tips to gossip blogs about Madison, and we set the date for the major business meeting with Jonathan. In the 8th and final week, I completed my last preparations. I rehearsed my boardroom speech in front of the mirror. Grace was now 2 months old, thriving and happy, and being looked after by a team of expert nannies. I stood there, dressed in my powerful suit, with my platinum hair and perfectly done red lipstick. I stared at my reflection in the mirror and barely knew the woman who was looking back at me. It is time to go destroy them, I whispered to myself. The meeting was set for April 12th. They had no clue what was about to happen to them. On April 2nd, only 10 days before the meeting, Madison was still posting on Instagram every single day. She was on a beach getaway in Turks and Caicos, a trip paid for by her parents. Her caption said, 26 and living my best life. So blessed. Natural beauty, no filter. She had 486,000 followers, and the comments were filled with people praising her for being so perfect. Madison truly believed she was untouchable. I decided to make a call to her from my old phone number. It was the number she would still recognize and have saved. She answered the phone with a laugh. I could hear Alexis and Victoria in the background with her. "Oh my God, the trash is actually calling me," she yelled. "I am putting you on speaker." Then she addressed me directly. "Emma, how is life in whatever hole you are living in these days? Did you manage to find a homeless shelter that would take you and a baby?" I made my voice sound small and defeated, exactly how she would expect me to sound. "I was just calling to see if you might reconsider the situation with Child Protective Services. Please, I miss Grace so much." The case, of course, had been dismissed in the very first week due to a lack of evidence, but I knew Madison was vicious enough to lie about it. "Oh, sweetie," she said in a mocking tone. "Even Child Protective Services did not want your baby. You are such a worthless mother. But look on the bright side. At least you can look forward to Michael and Alexis's wedding next month. You are officially invited to watch from the servants' entrance." I could hear all of them cackling loudly. Victoria shouted from the background, "Tell her we do not even remember who she is anymore." Then Alexis jumped in, "And tell her Michael said the last 3 years were the absolute worst of his life." There was another round of laughter. "You know what, Emma?" Madison said. "You were born a nobody. You will always be a nobody, but I appreciate the laugh." Then she ended the call, their laughter still ringing in my ears. I was sitting in my office at Harrington Global, and the phone had been on speaker the whole time. Richard and Crawford had heard every single word. My face was a mask of cold stone, showing absolutely no emotion. "Did you get everything you needed?" Richard asked me. I simply nodded. "Yes. It is time to launch the Madison plan now." The very next morning, on April 3rd at 6 o'clock, the gossip blog Elite Secrets dropped a news story. The headline read, "Instagram influencer Madison Sterling, the lies behind the likes." It was a total takedown, complete with all the evidence. It featured her real driver's license, which proved she was actually 32 years old. It had legally acquired medical records that listed every single one of her plastic surgeries. There were side-by-side photos, comparing her natural beauty claims with the surgical facts. It even included financial records that proved her parents were paying for 70% of her influencer lifestyle. There were also screenshots that showed her lying to brands about her real age. The article immediately went viral. In less than 2 hours, the hashtag Madison Sterling Exposed became the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Over on TikTok, users started making videos analyzing every one of her pictures, looking for signs of surgery. Beauty YouTubers uploaded videos with titles like "Madison Sterling lied to all of us." Her sponsors began to drop her. Sephora pointed to a breach of contract because of misrepresentation. Fashion Nova sent a short message saying, "We demand honesty. Your contract is terminated." The company Flat Tummy Tea put out a statement, "We are ending our partnership effective immediately." 12 more brands canceled their deals within just 4 hours. At 9 in the morning, the prestige modeling agency sent her an email. The message said, "Dear Madison, due to contract violations concerning undisclosed cosmetic procedures and misrepresenting your age, we are terminating your contract, effective immediately. Please make sure all agency property is returned by the end of the business today." Madison had absolutely no idea that I was the new owner of that agency. At 11 o'clock, she started an Instagram live stream. She was crying, and her makeup was a complete mess. "You guys, these are all lies," she cried into her phone. "I am 26. I have never had any surgery. This is all fake. Someone is trying to ruin my life." But the comment section was filled with angry messages. People were writing things like, "We all saw your driver's license," and "Just own up to it. You lied to everyone." I watched as someone typed "unfollow." 47,000 people were watching her public breakdown happen live. Her number of followers began to plummet. It dropped from 486,000 to 450,000, then down to 420,000, and then all the way to 380,000. Madison just kept sobbing into the camera. "Please, I have no idea who is doing this, but please just make it stop," her mother Victoria called her. "Get off of Instagram right now. You are just making things so much worse," Madison cried back. "Mom, somebody leaked everything, my private medical records. How can that even be legal?" Victoria replied sharply, "I do not care. You need to fix this." Within 1 week, Madison's follower count had fallen to just 180,000. She had no sponsors left and no modeling agency. The gossip sites were publishing new articles about her every single day. Her name had turned into a total joke. She called Victoria, sounding desperate. "Can you just have Dad make this all disappear?" "Your father is dealing with his own set of problems," Victoria told her without any sympathy. "Sterling Industries is in serious trouble. You need to handle this yourself." I watched the news coverage of her spectacular fall from grace with Richard. "Phase 1 is now complete," I stated. "Madison has been neutralized. She called me trash and thought it was funny to film my assault. She is getting exactly what she has earned." Richard looked over at me. "Who is our next target?" he asked. I allowed myself a small smile. "Alexis is next. We will deal with Victoria and Jonathan at the boardroom meeting." On April 5th, inside the Sterling mansion, Michael and Alexis were deeply involved in planning their wedding for the next month. Alexis's fake baby bump was getting larger. It was a very expensive silicone prosthetic and looked completely real. Victoria was stressing over every little wedding detail. At the same time, Jonathan felt the weight of the family business crushing him, but he tried his best to hide his anxiety from everyone. That afternoon, a mysterious FedEx package was delivered to the house. Michael took it into his study to open it in private. Inside, he discovered a complete file on a woman named Alexandra Marie Thompson. It held her criminal record, including mugshots from 3 different scams she had pulled before. There were also documents that laid out her other fake pregnancies in detail. The file even contained the original ultrasound picture she had used, with digital records showing it was bought from a website. Bank statements revealed she had stolen $650,000 from her previous victims. A simple note was placed on top of the pile. It read, "Michael, for 3 years, you made me feel worthless. Now it is your turn to know what it feels like to be completely fooled." The note continued, "Check her stomach. It is a fake. You are welcome. A friend." Michael stormed out of his study, his face filled with rage. He went directly to the master bedroom where Alexis was getting ready. "Who in the world are you?" he shouted, throwing the entire file at her. Alexis began to stammer, trying to find the right words. "Baby, I can explain everything." He immediately cut her off. "Your name is not even Alexis. You are nothing but a con artist." She made a dash for the door, but he grabbed her arm to stop her. Her sleeve snagged on a dresser drawer, and a silicone pregnancy belly tumbled out from under her dress. It was an expensive, very realistic fake that landed on the carpet with a soft thud. Michael could only stare at it in shock. "Get out of my house right now." At that exact moment, Victoria and Jonathan hurried into the room. They both froze, their eyes fixed on the fake belly on the floor. Victoria gasped, and Jonathan reached down to pick up the folder. As he read through the pages, the color drained from his face. "She is a wanted woman in California," he said, in disbelief. Alexis lunged for her purse, but Jonathan quickly moved to block her path to the door. "You are not going anywhere," he said with a firm voice. "I am calling the police." At 11 in the morning, officers from the Greenwich Police Department arrived. They were holding a warrant from California that had finally been processed. As they placed Alexis in handcuffs, she started to scream hysterically. "This is all a setup. Somebody sent you that information. Someone is trying to hurt us." Victoria stood frozen in place. Who could possibly have known about this? Madison watched the whole scene play out, then said what everyone was thinking. "First it was me, and now it is Alexis. Someone is deliberately coming after our family." Jonathan tried to dismiss her concerns. "Do not be so paranoid," he said. "This is just a strange coincidence." But the look of doubt was obvious on his face. That evening, Michael sat all by himself in his study, slowly sipping a glass of scotch. His entire world was falling apart around him. His 3-year marriage had been nothing but a cruel bet, a joke that his friends were still laughing about. He had a real daughter with Emma, a child that he had completely walked away from. He now understood that Alexis was a professional scammer, and on top of it all, his company was on the verge of collapse. It felt like everything he touched turned to garbage. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to an old, disconnected number. For a moment, he almost called to apologize to Emma. Just then, Victoria stepped into the room. "Do not you even think about it," she warned him. "Maybe we were too harsh with her," Michael mumbled quietly. "And the baby, Grace. She is my daughter, and Victoria's hand flew across his face in a hard slap. "That woman is out of your life. She means nothing to you," she hissed at him. "You need to focus on what is truly important, which is saving this family's business." Michael looked utterly defeated. What if someone is targeting us because of how we treated Emma? Victoria just laughed, a cold and empty sound. "Emma? That pathetic little girl is probably lying in a ditch somewhere. She has neither the money nor the intelligence to come after a family like ours." From far away, I was watching them on a security camera feed I had hacked. I heard every single word they said. My face was as cold as ice. On April 6th, Richard and I were watching the Sterling family destroy themselves when he finally spoke. "The Sterlings are tearing themselves apart," he said in a calm voice. "Michael and Alexis have broken up. Madison's entire career is in ruins. Victoria is in a panic about their money. You could end all of this right now. You could take Grace, move to Paris, and just live a quiet life. They are already paying for what they did." I looked down at Grace, who was just 2.5 months old. She smiled up at me from her little bassinet. "Maybe you are right," I whispered. "Maybe getting revenge is not worth it. They are already destroying their own lives. All I really want is peace. I want Grace to have a childhood that is far away from all of this terrible ugliness." I started to make arrangements to move to London. Harrington Global had offices in Europe, and it would be easy for me to run the company from there. I could just leave and never have to see the Sterlings ever again. I could simply let them drown in the disaster they had created. For a short time, I honestly thought about showing them mercy. But then, April 8th happened. A thick envelope filled with legal documents arrived at the Harrington Global office. The Sterling family had filed an emergency petition for custody against me, Emma Morgan. They made the claim that I had abandoned Grace. They presented completely false witness statements from staff members they had paid off. The statements all claimed that I was mentally unstable. They even included a fake psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Rothman. Their argument was that the Sterling family could offer a stable home with 2 parents. They insisted that Michael was a changed man who wanted to do the right thing. The documents argued that it was in the child's best interest to live in the wealthy and stable Sterling home, not with a single mother. An emergency hearing was set for April 11th, which was only 3 days away. The case was assigned to the Honorable Judge Robert Whitmore in the Connecticut Family Court. Richard's face was serious. "Emma, this is a very big problem," he said. "Whitmore comes from old Connecticut money. He plays golf with Jonathan Sterling. He is completely biased and always favors traditional family setups." I protested. "But I have proof. The assault. The abuse." Richard just shook his head. "They are going to argue that all of your evidence was collected illegally. Without evidence that the court will accept, it is only your word against theirs in a Connecticut family court. They have the home court advantage in this situation," he concluded. That realization felt like a punch straight to my stomach. I have $2.3 billion, and I could still lose my own daughter. Money does not guarantee a win in family court, especially when you are dealing with a compromised judge. My legal team of 5 of the best lawyers gathered in my office. "We need Dr. Morrison to testify about the abuse that happened at the hospital," one of them said. "She is too afraid," another one answered. "Testifying would mean going against the same hospital that the Sterling family donates millions to." "What about Rebecca Martinez, the nurse?" I asked. "Her testimony would be thrown out as hearsay. She did not actually see the assault happen. And the security videos from the mansion, I pushed? It was obtained illegally. The judge will not allow it in court. So we have absolutely nothing? I asked, and my voice was shaking. My lead lawyer was completely honest with me. We have your testimony, he said, but they will try to paint you as a bitter and vengeful ex-daughter-in-law. And we already know Judge Whitmore is on their side. On April 11th, we were at the Connecticut Family Court in downtown New Haven. I walked in with my entire legal team. On the other side of the courtroom, the Sterling family sat with their 8 lawyers. The Sterling's lawyer was the first to speak. Your Honor, this case is about the welfare of a child. Grace Sterling was born into a family that loves her. Her father, Michael Sterling, has certainly made mistakes, as we all have, but he is now fully committed to being the father that she truly deserves. Her grandmother, Victoria Sterling, and her grandfather, Jonathan Sterling, are pillars of Connecticut society. They have the financial resources and the stability to provide her with an exceptional life, he continued. The respondent, Emma Morgan, has shown very erratic behavior. She left her child with complete strangers. She has been spotted going in and out of various luxury hotels and corporate office buildings. We are asking for an immediate transfer of custody until a full evaluation can be completed. They were twisting my work at Harrington Global and using it to make me look like a suspicious person. My lawyer immediately stood up to object. Your Honor, this is a clear attempt by an abusive family to cause even more harm to my client, my lawyer argued. Emma Morgan was assaulted. She was thrown out of the Sterling house during a blizzard with her 3-day-old baby. Objection, their lawyer shouted loudly. There has been no evidence of an assault presented to this court. Sustained, the judge said without hesitation. Counsel, please stick to the facts and the evidence. Then Victoria took the stand. She was dressed like the world's most perfect grandmother in a Chanel suit, and in pearls. Her face a perfect mask of fake concern. Your Honor, I loved Emma as if she were my own daughter, she started. We welcomed her into our home, even with her humble background. We did our best to help her get used to our family's way of life. When she finally had the baby, we were all so happy, Victoria lied without missing a beat. But then Emma became more and more paranoid and started making accusations. She claimed that we were trying to steal Grace. We were only trying to help her. She let out a dramatic sigh. She left our home on her own in the middle of the night. We were sick with worry. Now, we find out she has been, well, we do not even know where she is living or what she is doing. Michael just wants to be a father to his little girl. My lawyer then began his cross-examination. Mrs. Sterling, you claim that Emma left on her own. Can you explain why a woman who was recovering from surgery would choose to leave during a blizzard with a newborn baby? I have no idea. I already told you. She was not thinking clearly, Victoria answered, cool as ice. My lawyer pressed on. Did you, or any member of your family, ever physically harm Emma Morgan? Of course not. That is a terrible and vicious lie, she said. Then what about this? My lawyer asked, holding up a phone to show the video from Madison's Instagram. Objection, their lawyer shouted. That video was recorded without my client's permission and has been altered. The judge agreed. Sustained. I cannot allow evidence that was obtained illegally. Then it was Madison's turn to testify, speaking quietly and looking well-rehearsed after her public embarrassment. Emma was always resentful of our family, she claimed. She was jealous of me and our life. The night she left, she was just screaming at my mother. She was making threats toward us, Madison went on. We were trying to get her to be calm, but she just bolted out into the snow. I was worried about the baby. That is the reason I recorded her, so I could show her unstable behavior to Child Protective Services. Next, Michael delivered the performance of his career. Your Honor, I have made horrible mistakes. I was not a good husband. I did not give Emma the attention she deserved, and I am deeply sorry for that. But I love my little girl. I want to be her dad. I am getting help now, working to be a better man. My family can offer her a stable life, a good home, financial support, and a real future. Emma, I do not have a clue where she is even staying. How can she possibly take care of Grace the right way? And then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the stand and I told them exactly what happened. I told them about the cruel bet. I explained all the abuse. I described how they ambushed me at the hospital and then threw me outside into a snowstorm. But the Sterling family's lawyer picked my story to pieces. Miss Morgan, you are claiming there was abuse, but you do not have any proof. You never filed a police report. There are no medical records from a hospital about this attack you describe. You do not have any witnesses other than your friends, who of course would back you up. Is it not more likely that you are just an angry ex-wife who is trying to prevent a father from seeing his own child? No! I cried out. They pushed me down the stairs. I have a video of it. A video that you got by illegally hacking into their home security system, he fired back. Objection, my lawyer called out. Overruled, the judge said. Please answer the question, Miss Morgan. Someone else got it for me, I said, my voice trembling. So you are admitting it was acquired through illegal methods? He pushed. Judge Whitmore then gave his final decision. This is a very challenging case, but my main duty is to do what is best for the child. While I believe Miss Morgan is a loving mother, I am concerned about the absence of real evidence to back up her claims. On the other hand, the Sterling family has shown that they have the money, the stability, and a strong wish to provide for Grace. Because of this, I am awarding temporary custody to Michael Sterling and his family, which will be followed by a full 30-day evaluation of some kind. Miss Morgan will be allowed supervised visits twice a week. In that single moment, my whole world came crashing down. No, please, I am begging you, I pleaded. They brought Grace in from the other room. I hugged her as tight as I could, sobbing uncontrollably. No, please, you cannot take her away from me. Please! A social worker gently pried Grace out of my arms. Victoria then took the baby from the social worker, with a smug smile on her face. Grace was crying, reaching her little arms out for me. I just crumpled to the floor. This was so much worse than being tossed out into the snow. Because this time, I had money, I had influence, I had help, I had everything I needed, but I still lost. The entire system had let me down. On the steps of the courthouse, cameras were flashing as the news reporters covered the story. Victoria carried Grace to the Sterling's car. Madison stood right next to her, looking like she had won a great victory. Michael did not even bother to look at me. That night, I was all alone in the huge penthouse suite of Harrington Global. I could only stare at Grace's empty crib. I finally made the call to Richard. I tried to handle this the right way, I said, my voice completely empty. I tried to follow the law and be reasonable. I played by all the rules, and they still came out on top. They took my daughter from me. We can file an appeal, Richard said. We can keep fighting. No, I said, and my voice was suddenly different. It was cold and absolute. The rules are done. I am done playing their game. You once told me that I own the whole game board. Well, fine. I am about to flip the entire board over. Arrange the contract meeting. I want every single one of them in that room. April 12th, tomorrow. Emma, are you positive about this? Richard asked. They are looking for a war. Then I will give them total destruction, I answered. From midnight until 6 in the morning, I got to work. I called Dr. Morrison. I'm going to need you to testify, I told her. I will make sure you are safe. Please. I could hear her crying on the phone. I am so terrified, she said. Me too, I admitted. But we have to do this. My team was able to find Madison's Instagram Live video from the hospital, which she had deleted. It was still on the Instagram servers, and we could legally get it. My lawyers filed an emergency motion with the court right away, using this new evidence. I did not get any sleep. I put on my battle armor, a white suit from Tom Ford, my hair dyed a perfect platinum blonde, with bright red lipstick. I looked at myself in the mirror. Let's finish this, I said. It was April the 12th. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the main office of Harrington Global in the middle of Manhattan. On the 52nd floor, the Sterling family pulled up in a Lexus, a big step down from the Mercedes that had been taken away from them recently. They looked like pale imitations of the people they once were. Jonathan's suit looked way too big on him now, since he had lost so much weight from all the stress. Victoria's jewelry was clearly not real. The valuable pieces had been sold off a long time ago just to pay the rent. Madison was not wearing any designer clothes, and her hair was not done by a professional. She just looked incredibly tired. Michael was hungover and gave off an air of total defeat. In spite of all this, they tried their hardest to act confident, a feeling they no longer had. This $75 million contract was the only thing that could save them now. Inside the elevator, Victoria spoke with a confidence she did not feel. "Do not forget, we are Sterlings. We come from old money. They will show us respect for that." She glanced at her husband. "Jonathan, you let me do the talking. We have to get this contract, or we will lose everything." Madison, who was focused on her phone, chimed in. "Well, at least that whole mess with Emma is finally done with. The judge gave grace to us." Michael remained completely silent, just staring down at the elevator floor. The doors opened smoothly onto the 52nd floor, a space that was built to show off power. The windows stretched from the floor to the ceiling, providing an amazing view of the Manhattan skyline, and the walls were decorated with expensive modern art. It was the very definition of incredible wealth. The receptionist led them to the conference room. The conference room was enclosed by huge glass walls that had a perfect view of Central Park. A very long conference table had enough room for 20 people. At the far end of the table, the chair for the chief executive officer was turned around, facing the city. 8 members of the board, all wearing expensive suits, were already sitting down. Security guards stood quietly near the exits. A massive screen was mounted on the wall, right behind the main chair. The Sterling family sat down across from the empty seat. Jonathan coughed to clear his throat. "Thank you so much for giving us the chance to—" A voice suddenly interrupted him. "Hello, Jonathan." The large chair slowly turned to face them. I was sitting in it, looking like the definition of absolute power, with my platinum blonde hair and a sharp white Tom Ford suit. I had on red Louis Vuitton high heels and wore my grandfather's special ring. My lipstick was a fierce shade of red, and my face was as cold as stone. "Hello, Victoria, Madison, and Michael." Their reactions seemed to happen in slow motion. All the color washed out of Jonathan's face, and he collapsed back into his chair. Victoria actually passed out, and Madison had to grab her, staring at me with a look of complete terror. Madison's jaw dropped, her brain unable to process what it was seeing. Her phone fell from her hand and made a loud noise on the floor. Michael was just frozen in place, his eyes wide with shock, not able to say a single word. The security guards shifted to block the exits. Nobody was leaving. Jonathan was finally able to speak. "What? Whoa, what is going on here? Is this supposed to be some kind of sick joke?" I stood up and began to walk slowly around the conference table. My voice was quiet, but had a dangerous tone. "Please have a seat. We have a $75 million contract that we need to discuss." Victoria woke up and became hysterical. "This is crazy. You should not be here. You are a nobody. You are just—" I cut her off sharply. "I am Chairwoman Emma Catherine Harrington. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Harrington Global Industries, and the only person to inherit my grandfather, William Harrington's, $2.3 billion fortune." I gestured toward the huge portrait on the wall. It was the official photograph of William Harrington, and the reason you are all here is because you submitted an application for a contract with my company. Michael finally managed to find his voice. "This cannot be happening. How is this possible? How am I here? Well, let me tell you all a story." I pressed a button on a remote, and the giant screen behind me lit up. The very first thing we saw was security footage from February 15th at 3 o'clock in the morning. It clearly showed me being thrown down the front steps of the Sterling estate, with the timestamp visible in the corner. Victoria screamed, "Turn it off. No, you are going to sit there and watch." The video continued to play, showing everything. Madison recording on her phone while I was dragged across the marble floor, I was in the blood on the floor, Victoria screaming at me to get on my knees, security guards pulling my daughter Grace away from me. It showed them throwing me down the stone stairs, my blood making a dark stain in the white snow, and then the doors slamming shut. The entire boardroom was completely silent. Even the executives who were seeing this for the first time looked absolutely horrified. On February 15th at 3 in the morning, you threw me down those stairs. At that very moment, I was exactly what you always said I was, a nobody, broke, helpless, trash. The next image on the screen was William James Harrington's death certificate. The date he died was listed as February 15th at 7 in the morning. 4 hours later, my grandfather passed away from a heart attack. It happened right after he saw the security footage of what you all did to me. His last will stated that I was his only heir, and it went into effect the second he passed away. I paused, letting the reality of my statement settle in the room. So, when you forced me out into the snow at 3 in the morning, I had nothing. But when the clock ticked past 7, I became a billionaire. You just were not aware of it yet. Victoria could only whisper, "Oh my goodness." Imagine the news story. In-laws and a mistress throw a woman into a blizzard, not knowing she had just inherited a billion-dollar company. That is quite a headline, is it not? Now, let us move on to your individual problems. The presentation then showed Jonathan Sterling's financial records, which were all negative. Sterling Industries is in debt for $83 million. However, that number is no longer accurate. 3 weeks ago, I bought $75 million of that debt from your lenders for a lower price. I am demanding payment for that debt today. You have 48 hours to pay the full amount, or I will take control of all your assets. Jonathan opened his mouth to speak, but he could not form any words. And there is this. The logo for the Federal Bureau of Investigation appeared, followed by a series of emails that proved Jonathan had stolen money from the company's pension fund. The FBI was sent these documents at 9 o'clock this morning. You should expect formal charges before the end of the week. Next. The screen changed to show Victoria Sterling's shops. Sterling-style boutiques. There are 5 stores, and they are all in buildings that I happen to own. Your lease is terminated starting today. The locks on all locations will be changed at 5 o'clock this evening. You are also behind on your rent by $480,000. I am filing a lawsuit to get all the past due rent, plus money for damages. And there is one last thing. The Internal Revenue Service logo flashed on the screen. Yesterday, the IRS was given proof of $2.3 million in tax fraud. You can anticipate a complete investigation. A picture of Madison wearing my mother's jewelry showed up, and I am suing you for $5 million for stealing my mother's heirloom jewelry. Victoria gasped and grabbed at her chest. Next slide. Madison Sterling. Pictures of her before and after her public disgrace filled the screen. Your career as a model is finished. Your status as an influencer is gone. But this next part is my favorite. A video started to play. It was the complete recording of Madison's Instagram Live from the hospital, where she broadcast my suffering. This was streamed to 500,000 people. That means it can be used as evidence in court. The Greenwich Police Department was given this recording this morning. Charges for assault have been filed. Madison began to weep. Now for Michael Sterling. The entire video of the college bet played, showing every mean word, every laugh, and every shameful thing he said about me. This video will be sent to every major news station at 6 o'clock tonight. Your theft of $3.8 million from Sterling Industries has also been turned over to the FBI, but this is the part that will truly hurt you. The last slide was about the fight for custody of Grace. A new recording appeared from Dr. Morrison's phone, which captured their threats and the attack at the hospital with perfect sound. Madison's Instagram Live is a public broadcast, which makes it legal evidence. I also have statements from 3 people who used to work at the Sterling estate, who I paid very generously to speak the truth. An emergency request was submitted this morning to the Connecticut Family Court. Because of all this new proof, a new judge will review the case tomorrow morning. You will never be allowed to see Grace again. Michael leapt at me from across the table. You witch! You've destroyed everything. Security guards immediately tackled him and held him on the floor. I did not even move. As Michael was pinned to the ground by security, he yelled, "You destroyed my life. We gave you a wonderful life." I leaned over and spoke softly so that only he could hear me. You gave me absolutely nothing. You only married me to win a bet. You watched them hurt me for 3 years. You walked away from your own daughter when she was just 3 days old. I am not the one who destroyed your life, Michael. You are. Victoria dropped to her knees and actually began to plead. Please, we can work something out. We will give you whatever you want. I will say I am sorry. I will. You do not have anything that I desire. I walked to where she was and looked down at her. You called me trash. You said I was worthless. You told me that I should be left out in the snow. But trash does not control a $2.3 billion company. Trash does not bring down powerful families. You did not throw away trash, Victoria. I leaned very close to her. You threw away a queen. Jonathan, looking completely broken, made one final attempt. The agreement. Please, we have to. There is no agreement. There never was one. This meeting was not about making a deal. It was about making you see who you ruined and showing you who ruined you. I picked up the remote control once more. Oh, and there is something else. The screen switched to a YouTube live broadcast. The number of viewers showed 4.2 million. This whole meeting has been broadcast live on my private YouTube channel. 4.2 million people just witnessed this entire discussion. The screen was filled with comments. Wow, she is a total queen. They are getting exactly what they deserve. This is the best revenge story I have ever witnessed. Emma Harrington is my new hero. Madison's voice was a high-pitched scream. You are not allowed to do that. That is against the law. We did not agree to this. You probably should have read the non-disclosure form you signed before you came in. Section 47 gives media consent for business meetings. I gave Victoria the paper she had signed without reading. You failed to read it. That is a lesson I learned from you. Always read the fine print. This was a clear callback to the hospital when they made me sign divorce documents. Security started to lead them out of the room, and they were not being gentle. Victoria was being pulled away. You are going to regret this. We are going to sue. With what money will you sue me? You have no money left. Goodbye, Victoria. Madison was crying uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I am truly sorry, please. You recorded my most painful moment for your own amusement. You wanted me to become famous for being humiliated. Well, I have good news for you. You are famous now, too. Michael looked at me one final time. Emma, please. Grace? She is still my daughter. No, she is my daughter. You were just the sperm donor who left her. You will not see her ever again. Security dragged him from the room. Jonathan simply walked out in silence, a man who was broken and had lost everything. His entire legacy was gone. I was left alone in the conference room, gazing out at the New York City skyline. Richard came into the room. The live stream is still going. 5.8 million people are watching now. I just nodded. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Dr. Morrison. The emergency custody hearing is set for tomorrow with the new information. We are going to win. Grace is finally coming home. I smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time in a very long time. Outside the Harrington Global Headquarters, the Sterling family stepped into complete and total chaos. 50 reporters were gathered, cameras were flashing, and they were all shouting questions. Is it true that you left a newborn baby in the snow? Did you really marry her as part of a bet? Are you all going to be arrested? Federal agents were there waiting for them. Jonathan Sterling, Michael Sterling, you are both under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud. They snapped handcuffs on them as they read them their rights out loud. Victoria and Madison were not in handcuffs, but they were swarmed by the media. Madison's phone was buzzing without stopping, filled with messages of pure hatred. Victoria frantically tried to cover her face from all the cameras. On Twitter, the whole world was buzzing. The hashtag Sterling Family Exposed was the #1 trend across the globe. My name, Emma Harrington, was trending at #2, and Billion Dollar Revenge was at #3. The very next day, we appeared in court for the emergency custody hearing. Using Dr. Morrison's testimony, the hospital's own security videos, and Madison's live stream as proof, the judge made his decision right away. He gave me complete custody of my daughter. The Sterlings were not allowed any right to see her. Their rights to visit were taken away until the criminal cases were over. When they finally put Grace in my arms, I just hugged her tightly and cried. She was finally safe. At long last, she was completely safe. 6 months later, on October 15th, my picture was on the cover of Forbes magazine. The title said, "Emma Harrington, the Chief Executive Officer who started with nothing." The value of Harrington Global's stock had increased by 40%. We had already opened new offices in 3 different countries. I was in my large office, watching my daughter Grace, who is now 8 months old, playing happily on a blanket beside my desk. My friend Rebecca came to visit. "You actually did it," she said with a smile. "No," I said to correct her. "We did it." The story of the Sterling family was over. Jonathan was convicted of embezzlement and given a sentence of 12 years in a federal prison. Victoria was put under house arrest. She had lost all her money and had to get a job at a department store to start paying back the huge amount she owed the government. She was now living in a very small studio apartment. Madison was able to stay out of jail, but her career online was completely destroyed. She got a job working for a call center in customer service. Her number of Instagram followers fell to only 12,000, which was a loss of 97%. Michael agreed to a plea deal and was put in prison for 7 years. He also legally gave up all of his rights as a parent to Grace. As for Alexis, whose real name was Alexandra Thompson, she was found guilty in California of several types of fraud and was sentenced to 15 years. People still ask me sometimes if I have any regrets about what I did. People always ask me if the revenge was worth it in the end. All I have to do is look at my daughter, Grace. She is happy, healthy, and growing up wrapped in love and feeling completely safe. I think about the $50 million I donated to shelters for women and programs for victims of abuse. I think of all the women who wrote to me, sharing their own stories of survival and how they found their own strength. That original video of Madison's attack on me has now been seen more than 127 million times. The Sterling family became a global example of justice and karma. Their cruelty was exposed for the entire world to see. So, was it worth it? Yes. Every single second of it was. Let me share a powerful lesson I learned. It is something I wish someone had told me when I was lying beaten in the snow, feeling like I was completely worthless. Pain does not have to be the thing that breaks you. Sometimes, if you can find the strength, if you refuse to let them win, that pain can forge you into something stronger than a diamond. It can make you unbreakable. When they tossed me out with those potato chips, I was shattered and bleeding. I truly believed I was a nobody, but I was so wrong. I was not a nobody. I was just someone who had not yet discovered her own power. The media attention from my live stream was absolutely overwhelming. For weeks, I could not step outside without being recognized. Some people called me a hero. Others said I was just being spiteful, that wanting revenge was wrong, and that I should have just taken the high road. To those people, I have a simple question. What would you have done? Would you have just turned the other cheek when they threw your newborn baby out into a blizzard? Would you have forgiven them when they tried to use a corrupt system to take your child away from you? Would you have shown mercy to people who had never shown you any? I did not think so. You see, there is a huge difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is about making someone suffer, just because they made you suffer. Justice is about making sure that they can never, ever hurt another person again. What I pursued was justice. The Sterling family did not just mistreat me. They had a long and ugly history of hurting people. After my story became public, 7 other women came forward. Each one had her own horrible story about the Sterling family. These were women Michael had dated before me, women who worked at his company, women who had been abused and then forced into silence. Every single one of them thanked me for finally having the courage to expose the truth of what they had been through. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that I had done the right thing. I launched the Harrington Foundation for Abuse Survivors, using $50 million of my own money to get it started. We provide legal assistance, therapy, safe housing, and job training for people who are trying to escape abusive situations. In only 6 months, we have already helped more than 2,000 people. My daughter, Grace, will grow up knowing that when someone tries to make you feel insignificant, you have 2 choices. You can either believe what they say, or you can prove them wrong. I chose to prove them wrong. A year later, on April 12th, the very same day as that final boardroom showdown, I called a press conference. The room was filled with reporters, and camera flashes were going off everywhere. 1 year ago today, I sat in a boardroom with the people who had tormented me for 3 years. These were the same people who threw me and my infant daughter out into a snowstorm. These were the people who tried to use a broken legal system to steal my child. Today, I am standing here as the chief executive officer of a thriving company, as a mother to a happy and healthy little girl, and as a woman who refused to let cruelty write the end of her story. I am frequently asked if I have any regrets, if the revenge was truly worth it. I want to be perfectly clear. What I did was not revenge. It was about holding them accountable. The Sterling family did not lose everything because I was angry with them. They lost everything because they broke the law. Jonathan Sterling stole money from his employees' retirement accounts. Victoria Sterling cheated on her taxes for millions of dollars. Michael Sterling engaged in fraud. Madison Sterling assaulted me and broadcast it live to 500,000 people. I did not destroy them. They destroyed themselves. All I did was turn on the lights so the rest of the world could see it happen. For anyone out there who feels like they are caught in their own blizzard, in their own moment of absolute hopelessness, I need you to hear this. You are not trash. You are not a nobody. You are not any of the cruel things someone called you when they were trying to crush your spirit. You are powerful. You are worthy. You are enough. Get back up, dust yourself off, and show them exactly who you are. The room erupted in applause. After the press conference, I went home to my penthouse apartment. Grace was there with her nanny, building a tower with some blocks. The second she saw me, her face lit up, and she held her little arms out to me. I scooped her up and hugged her tight, taking in that wonderful, sweet baby scent. "You know what, little one?" I whispered to her. "Your mommy was almost broken, but she stood back up. And someday, when you are old enough, I'm going to tell you this entire story. I will tell you that no matter what anyone ever says to you, you are the only one who gets to decide who you are. Not them. You." Grace just giggled and playfully tugged on my hair. I laughed, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the sound was genuine and completely free. Rebecca came over later that evening. We sat on my balcony, enjoying a glass of wine and looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "The night in the snow?" "Every single day," I confessed. "But it is probably not in the way that you are thinking. I do not think about it with pain any longer. I think of it as the exact moment my whole life changed. It was the moment I stopped being a victim and chose to become a survivor. You are amazing, you know that, she said. I simply shook my head. I am not special, I told her. I am just a woman who refused to be kept down. That is precisely what makes you special, she answered. We sat there for a while in a comfortable silence, just watching the city lights flicker below us. So, what comes next for you? Rebecca asked. I considered it for a moment. Honestly, I do not have a definite plan. I want to keep growing the company. I want to keep helping people through the foundation. And I want to raise Grace to be a strong and compassionate person. Perhaps that is enough. It is more than enough, Rebecca replied. You have already changed the world for so many people. Later that night, long after Rebecca had left, I stood in Grace's nursery, just watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, and so absolutely perfect. I thought about my own mother, Catherine. I remembered how she had escaped from her own father's control, trying to make a life for herself. I remembered her working 3 jobs to raise me, and how her pride stopped her from asking for help, even when she was desperate. I also thought about my grandfather, William, and how he had watched me suffer for 2 painful years. He wanted to step in, but was held back by lawyers and complicated legal strategies. He was forced to watch someone he loved being mistreated. Both of them had been harmed by their own pride, by the gap that stubbornness had created between them and the people they loved. I would not repeat that mistake, I promise you, I whispered to my sleeping baby. You will grow up knowing how much you are loved. You will grow up knowing that asking for help is not a weakness, but a sign of strength. You will grow up knowing you never have to tolerate cruelty from anyone, no matter who they are, and if anyone ever tries to make you feel small, you will remember that your mother was thrown out in the snow and she came back a queen. Grace moved a little in her sleep, and her tiny hand made a little fist. I smiled and gently kissed her on the forehead. Tomorrow, I had a board meeting. Next week, we were launching a new division of Harrington Global focused on ethical business practices and taking excellent care of our employees. Next month, the foundation was opening 3 new shelters. But tonight I was just Emma. I was just a mother watching her daughter sleep. I was just a woman who had walked through hell and emerged stronger on the other side. And that was plenty. 5 years later, Grace is starting kindergarten today. She is wearing a purple dress that she proudly picked out all by herself. Her dark hair is in 2 pigtails that bounce when she gets excited. Mommy, do you think the other kids are going to like me? She asked as I drove her to school. Sweetheart, they are going to adore you, I told her. All you have to do is be yourself. That is always more than enough. Just like you always say, she chirped. Exactly like I always say, I answered. I watched her run toward the school building, completely fearless and full of light, and my heart felt like it might just burst with love. Harrington Global is now valued at $4.1 billion. We have branched out into renewable energy, ethical manufacturing, and the development of affordable housing. With every single choice I make, I think about the kind of world I want my daughter, Grace, to live in. The Harrington Foundation has now helped over 15,000 people escape from abusive homes. We have funded 3 documentary series that shine a light on the problem of domestic violence. We have lobbied politicians for stronger laws to protect survivors inside the family court system. The Sterling family is now just a distant, fading memory. Jonathan was released from prison last month, after he served his full sentence. He is 67 years old now and works as a sales clerk in a hardware store. I learned that Michael tried to get a job at Harrington Global, but that opportunity was completely closed to him. Victoria, now 73, is still under house arrest with a job in retail. For the rest of her life, she will be paying off her debt to the government. Madison is now 42, a fact she would be mortified to hear me say. She pulls the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner. She has no online presence, no fans, and no fame, only an ordinary life. For her, that is the worst fate imaginable. Michael was released 2 months ago, having done 5 years of his 7-year sentence. He tried to get in touch with me once, wanting to see Grace. I had my lawyer send him a clear message to stay far away. He surrendered his parental rights, which means he gets absolutely no contact. From what I hear, he manages a warehouse somewhere in New Jersey and is planning to marry someone new. I truly hope for her sake that he is a changed man, but I have my doubts. Alexis remains in prison and has another 7 years to serve. As for me, my life has taken a wonderful turn, and I am engaged. His name is David Collins, and he is a lawyer who fights for civil rights. Our paths first crossed at a fundraiser for my foundation. He knows everything about my past and loves me completely, not in spite of it, but including it. Most importantly, he loves Grace as if she was his own daughter. The day I told him the whole story about the Sterling family. When I laid out everything that had happened, he just looked at me and said, "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I don't see a victim or even just a survivor. I see a powerful woman who refused to let cruelty define her. I see absolute strength." In that single moment, I knew I could trust him with my heart. Our wedding is planned for next spring. It will be a small affair, with just our families and closest friends. Grace is going to be our flower girl, and she has already chosen her entire dress and accessories. I still have nights where I dream of the snow, of the bitter cold, and of Grace's cries growing fainter and fainter. I relive the moment I was sure we were both going to die, but I do not wake up in a cold sweat anymore. Instead, I get out of bed, go to Grace's room, and just stand there, watching her breathe. I tell myself that we survived. We did more than survive. We built a new life. Just last week, a young woman came to my office. She found out about us through the foundation. Her in-laws had abused her and then kicked her out with nothing, almost the same thing that happened to me. "I read about you," she explained, her voice choked with tears. "I saw everything you built, and I started to believe that if you could do it, maybe I could too." I held her hand and told her, "You absolutely can. And this time, you will not be alone." We found her a room in one of our shelters right away. We connected her with an attorney, arranged counseling for her, and helped her file an official police report. 2 months later, she sent me a photo of herself with her 2 kids. All 3 of them were beaming in their new apartment. Beneath the picture, she had written, "We are finally safe. Thank you for showing me it was possible." This is the real reason I did it all. It was never about getting even. It was about this exact feeling. It was for every woman who ever needed to see that you can be left to die in a snowstorm and still rise to become a queen. Today is April 12th, the anniversary of that last confrontation in the boardroom. I always do something meaningful on this date. This year, I am giving a speech at a TEDx event on the topic of recovering from trauma. I am here on the stage, gazing out at a crowd of 5,000 people. When they left me in that snowbank, I begin my talk. I was certain my life was over. I was certain that I was a nobody. And deep down, I was certain that I deserved it. I was wrong about every single thing. Pain does not break everyone. For some, if you have enough will and refuse to give up, pain can reshape you into something stronger than you ever imagined. I am not special. I do not have superpowers. I am simply a woman who would not be defeated. For anyone listening who feels lost in their own blizzard, trapped in their own moment of despair, this is not the end of your story. It is the very beginning. You have to get to your feet, brush off the snow, and reveal to the world your true self. Because nobodies do not build empires. Nobodies do not change the world. Nobodies do not inspire thousands of people to find their own strength. You are not a nobody. You are not worthless. You hold more power inside you than you could ever imagine. Someday, you will look back on this very moment and realize it was the point where you became unbreakable. The applause at the end of my speech goes on for 3 whole minutes. Afterward, a long line of people waits to share their own stories with me, to talk, to say thank you. They all want to let me know that they are getting to their feet too. Later that evening, I am home with Grace and David. The three of us are making dinner, a simple pasta dish that is Grace's absolute favorite. "Mommy, how come people always want to talk to you?" Grace asks, stirring the tomato sauce very carefully. "Because Mommy's story helps them realize something important." "What's that?" she asks, looking up at me. "That no matter what life throws at you, you get to choose what it means. You are the one who chooses who you become." "Like you chose to become a queen?" she says. I smile and say, "Something exactly like that, sweetheart." David comes up behind me and kisses my forehead. "The queen who came from the snow," he says quietly. "I really like the way that sounds," I tell him. After Grace is fast asleep, David and I are sitting out on the balcony, just like Rebecca and I used to do so many years ago. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" he asks. "The way it all happened so publicly? The live stream, the news coverage?" I think about his question for a second. "No, not at all," I finally say, "because this was always bigger than just me. It was for every person who was ever made to feel insignificant. It was for anyone who was ever thrown out, like they did not matter. I wanted them to see with their own eyes that you can recover from that. You can do much more than just survive. You can thrive." He tells me, "You've changed so many people's lives." I just shake my head. They changed their own lives. I just showed them it was possible. We sit there for a while in peaceful silence, holding hands and watching the city lights. I think about the Emma I was 5 years ago, the one who was broken and freezing, convinced she was taking her last breaths in the snow. If I could go back in time and speak to her, I would tell her, "Just hang on a little longer. Everything is about to change." 5 years from now, you will be happy, truly and completely happy. Grace will be healthy and vibrant. You will be deeply in love. You will have given thousands of people the courage to find their own power. The Sterling family will feel like a bad dream from long ago. The snow never lasts forever. The spring is on its way. My phone buzzes on the table. It is an email that came through the foundation. Another woman is reaching out for help. Another soul who is ready to fight her way out of her own storm. I reply immediately, putting her in touch with our network of support and letting her know that she is not by herself anymore. Because this is what it was always about. It was never about revenge, and it was not really about justice either. It was about making sure that nobody else ever had to lie freezing in the snow, broken and bleeding, believing they were worthless. It was about showing the entire world that you can be discarded like garbage and still build yourself into a queen. And if my story, my pain, and my path can help even one person find the strength to stand up and fight for a better life, then every second of that suffering was worth it. I look out at the Manhattan skyline, at the Harrington Global Tower that carries my grandfather's name, and at this city that I have made my own kingdom. I think of William, looking down on me from somewhere, and I hope I have made him proud. I think of my mother, Catherine, who taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what is hurting you. I think of my sweet Grace, sleeping safely in her bed, loved and cherished, and who will never have to wonder what she is worth. My name is Emma Catherine Morgan Harrington, and they abandoned me in the snow. They looked at me and saw a nobody, a girl they could use up and throw away. They were sure that I had nothing. What they never knew was that I was on the verge of receiving a $1 billion inheritance. They never counted on me surviving the night. They certainly never expected me to rise again. But the biggest thing they failed to understand is that when you try to break someone, you can sometimes make them incredibly strong. I am not a victim. I am much more than a survivor. I am a woman who was shattered and refuse to stay broken. I am a mother who will raise her daughter to know her own strength. I will teach her that her value is something she decides for herself. I am a chief executive officer who built an entire empire founded on integrity and compassion. I am a philanthropist who is turning my private suffering into a public mission. I am the queen who was forged in the snow. So if you are out there listening, if you feel lost in your own winter storm, if you are convinced that you are a nobody, I need you to hear me. You are wrong. You are somebody. You are strong. You are valuable. And your time to rise is coming. Stand up. The snow will always melt. Your new life is waiting for you.